Thank you so much for your willingness to help with VerseLocker, and especially for your willingness to enter the data for verse collections. And so I wanted to start this video by providing a brief overview of how the collections feature in VerseLocker really works for the average user. So what happens is the users can go to collections and then click on downloadable collections to view some of the verse sets that we recommend. And if they find one that interests them, they can click on more info to read about that set of verses. They can look at all of the verses and lessons that that particular collection contains, and then click Add to My Account. They'll pick a translation, and with just a few clicks, be able to add that entire verse set to their account. And that's what we call a public collection. And we call it public because it's available to the public. Anyone who's on VerseLocker can access it. There's also a feature that's lesser known called private collections. And those are collections that are not publicly available, but they are made for certain churches or groups or Sunday school classes that are wanting to memorize a particular set of verses. What happens is sometimes an organization will reach out to us and say, hey, we want our members to learn 32 verses on evangelism, or our pastor is preaching through Romans and we want our congregation to memorize a verse from each chapter. And so what they'll do is send us a list of all the verses that they'd like to offer, and then we put that in VerseLocker and give them a custom link that they can use to invite their members to memorize those verses. And so what I'll be asking you to do is help with the actual creation of those private collections as needed. It's not all the time that we have data entry to be done, but sometimes, like right now, we have quite a backlog of collections that we're trying to create. And so with that said, let me provide an overview of how you can create a collection in the VerseLocker administrator dashboard. So now that I've made you an administrator, when you come to VerseLocker on a laptop or a desktop computer, you'll be able to click on the More button in the menu bar, and you'll see this Admin tab. And so go ahead and click that. Once you click Admin, you'll see this screen, and you probably will not see all 4 of these buttons, but you'll certainly see the orange Collections Dashboard button, and that's what you want. So let's click that. And this page that we're looking at now is a list of all the collections that are available in VerseLocker. Some of them are active, as you can see, which means that they are publicly available. Some of them are private, like this one, which means that it's for a very specific group, and the only way to get it is if you have that invitation link. And then we have some that are inactive, which just means that we haven't gotten around to finalizing them yet. And so to create a private collection, this is what you'll do. You'll come back to the top of the page and click Create Collection, and you'll give it a title. And I'll be sending you a Word document or an Excel document that has all of the information you'll need to fill these fields out. And so let's just call this one ABC. This is going to be a verse for each letter of the alphabet. And generally speaking, you'll leave short description, long description, and image link blank, because I'll come back and fill those details in later. So right now we'll just give it a title, ABC verses, and click Save Changes. And so now when I scroll to the bottom of this page, I can see that ABC verses is now in the system, and it's inactive because we haven't finalized it yet. And if you have made an error and you want to change the title of the collection, you can just click on the title to come back to the screen that we were just on and edit the collection. The next step is to add lessons to the collection, and we can do that by clicking here where it says 0 lessons. And we can see that there are none yet, but let's create our first one. I'll just call this Lesson 1, but generally speaking, it would be something a little more creative. And again, I'll give you a document that has all of the lesson titles in it. So let's call this Lesson 1. And now we can see that that lesson has been created in the system. And now the next step is to add verses to the lesson. And so let's come here to Verses. and we'll click Add Verse. And from here, we'll just enter the reference of the passage. And so we can click the drop-down menu and scroll through all the books of the Bible, or we can begin typing in that field, and it'll show us the corresponding Bible book. So let's say this is from Isaiah, and the reference is 53:6. It's very simple, but let me be clear that you'll always want to follow this particular format where it's a chapter, then a colon, then a verse number. And then if it's a multiple verse passage like Isaiah 53 verses 6 through 7, you would do that like this with a dash. Be sure and use a dash rather than a comma or anything like that. So 53, 6 through 7. And that's all there is to adding a verse. And you can add as many verses as you'd like. You could add another one, let's say Genesis 1:1, and it's added also. If you accidentally enter the verses in the wrong order, you can also click this button, Reorder Verses, and you can rearrange them like that and hit Save Changes. When you're done with Lesson 1, you can come back and you'll be shown again a list of all the lessons in this particular collection. You can then create another lesson if you like. We'll call this Lesson 2, and again we could just go through and add verses to each lesson in that fashion. And that's really all that you'll be doing. I would just say once you finish adding all of the lessons as well as all of the verses to those lessons, just shoot me an email and let me know that you're done, and I'll be able to take a look at it and then finalize the remaining details like the short description, the long description, and the image link. And then I'll generate the invitation link that we'll then send to the church or to the organization that has requested the collection. But essentially, you'll just be creating the collection and then adding the lessons and then adding the verses to the lesson as I just demonstrated. So if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I'll be happy to help you. But thank you so much for your willingness to serve the Lord in this way. And again, just appreciate your willingness to volunteer.